Welcome to Hidden Truths, where the stories you were never meant to hear finally get told. This is not a place for surface-level thinking. This is where we dig deeper, where we ask the questions most people are too afraid to ask, and where we shine a light on the lies hiding in plain sight. Because the most dangerous lies are not the ones shouted from podiums or printed in headlines. They're the ones whispered into your habits, your routines, your quiet acceptance, the ones you don't even realize you've believed. You were told you were born free, that you live in a free society, with rights, with choices, with the power to shape your life. But what if that was never truly the case? What if you don't live freely at all? What if you live on permission? Permission to speak, permission to travel, permission to learn, to create, to build, to move, to exist. And that permission can be taken away the moment you stop complying. This is the permission paradox, how freedom was slowly redefined, not as a right you were born with, but as a reward you have to earn. Tonight we uncover how that happened, why it works so well, and what it means for you now. Because if your freedom disappears the moment you disobey, was it ever really freedom to begin with? The illusion of freedom. They told you that you were born free, that you live in a free world, that your choices are your own and your future is yours to shape. But when you pause and look closely, something starts to feel wrong. Not in the loud, dramatic way that stories of tyranny usually unfold, but in the quiet, uneasy way that truth hides in plain sight. Because when you begin to ask questions you were never meant to ask, you'll start to see that your freedom might not be as real as you thought. You say you're free, but are you? Can you travel wherever you want without submitting paperwork approvals or biometric scans? Can you speak your mind without worrying about bans, strikes, deplatforming, or social backlash? Can you start a business without licenses, regulations, and taxes waiting at every corner? Can you move your own money freely without limitations, without explanations, without triggering red flags? Can you choose how you heal, how you learn, how you build your life without needing someone else's permission? If freedom was ever meant to be yours by birthright, then why does so much of your daily life require approval? We were taught that we live in democracies where liberty is the foundation. But in truth, most of us live within invisible cages made of policy, protocol, and polite obedience. The bars are soft, the rules are quiet, the punishments are subtle until they're not. You may feel free because your cage is comfortable, because your routines are allowed. But true freedom isn't comfort, it's the absence of control over your will. And that's something very few people alive today actually possess. The illusion is clever. You're allowed to vote, to post, to comment, to travel, to work, to build. But all of it can be revoked, not just by government, but by platform, by corporation, by institution, by public opinion. Your rights are not rights if they disappear the moment you stop obeying. That's not freedom. That's permission, conditional access, temporary autonomy. And yet most of us don't question it. Why? Because the illusion was crafted to feel natural, to feel normal. From the time we were children, we were taught that permission equals safety. Ask before you act. Wait before you speak. Don't break the rules. Don't question the process. Trust the system. And slowly we forgot that freedom is not something you earn, it's something you defend. Most people have never tasted true freedom, so they don't miss it. They mistake the ability to choose between approved options as liberty. But choice is not freedom if the options are manufactured, if the boundaries are preset, if saying no is not an option. Imagine a child in a sandbox, told they can play however they want as long as they never step outside the box. Are they free, or just managed in a way that feels generous? That's how most modern freedom works. You are free to speak, but only within terms of service. You are free to move, but only with the right documents. You are free to express, but only with accepted views. You are free to earn, but only by following regulated systems. You are free to exist, but only as long as you remain compliant. The sandbox got bigger, but the walls are still there. And the moment you try to step beyond them, you'll feel the hand that was always there, even if you never saw it before. This is the illusion of freedom, a beautifully designed system where the cage is made of policies, where the keys are owned by others, and where the inmates have been convinced they are free because they are treated well enough not to complain. But freedom that can be revoked is not freedom. It's a contract, and contracts have conditions. The deeper truth is this: you are free only to the degree that you are willing to defend your freedom, only to the degree that you are willing to live without asking permission, only to the degree that you are willing to face the consequences of disobedience. And in a world where nearly every system has been built to punish disobedience in subtle but effective ways, how many people truly have that courage? The illusion works because most people would rather be comfortably managed than dangerously free. But comfort is not the goal of a free life. Agency is. And until you reclaim that, until you see the cage and stop pretending it's not there, you will remain a prisoner, calling yourself free. You don't live freely. You live on permission. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can begin to choose differently. A history of control. How permission became normal. To understand how permission became the silent gatekeeper of modern life, we need to go back, not just decades, but centuries. Because the control you feel today didn't arrive suddenly. It was built slowly, carefully, layer by layer, law by law. And it began not with force, but with the illusion of order. In the earliest human societies, there was no such thing as permission. You didn't ask to build a shelter, to hunt, to speak, or to raise a family. Your life was yours. The tribe functioned through mutual cooperation, not through centralized approval. Freedom wasn't a word, it was a reality. But then came hierarchy, kingdoms, religion, empire, and with them came a new idea that in order to be safe, you must surrender. Surrender your autonomy to kings who claimed divine authority. Surrender your voice to priests who spoke for gods. Surrender your movement, your labor, your thoughts to systems that promised peace in return for obedience. And for a while, it worked, because fear makes people comply. Fear of chaos, fear of invasion, fear of hell. So humans traded freedom for safety. They allowed themselves to be ruled. But even then, the control was visible. You knew who your king was, who your oppressor was. You could point to the palace, the temple, the guard with the sword. Then came the revolution of ideas, enlightenment, democracy, individual rights, the birth of a new promise that humans are born free, that government exists to serve, not to command. It was a powerful shift, and for a brief moment in history, it seemed like true freedom might become real. But systems of control don't disappear. They evolve, they adapt, they wear new masks. Instead of kings, we had officials. Instead of priests, we had regulators. Instead of swords, we had signatures. And the control returned, but this time it was bureaucratic, legal, respectable. You no longer needed to fear a tyrant. You just had to fear the forms, the stamps, the codes, the approvals. You didn't need chains. You needed licenses. And so the culture of permission was born, not out of malice, but out of the quiet hunger for control, wrapped in the language of order. You want to open a business? Get a permit. You want to speak to a crowd? Get a license. You want to build on your land? Get approval. You want to raise your own child? Follow regulations. Every new system created with good intent slowly became a gate, a checkpoint, a way to manage behavior. And the more complex society became, the more gates were built, and each one required permission. What began as a tool for coordination became a mechanism of control. And because it happened gradually, we didn't resist. We normalized it. We told ourselves it was necessary, that it kept us safe, that it kept society from falling apart. But at some point, the scales tipped, and control became the default. You're no longer asked if you want it. You're born into it. And unless you follow every rule, every protocol, every checkbox, you are punished. Not always with violence, but with denial. Denial of access, denial of opportunity, denial of participation. And that denial is just as powerful as a sword. In modern society, control is not enforced by brute force. It's enforced by systems. Systems that you're told are neutral, but are anything but. Because every system has a gatekeeper, and every gatekeeper decides who gets in and who doesn't. This is how permission became normal, how we moved from a world of rights to a world of access. Access that must be requested, earned, maintained. And the worst part? It's hidden in plain sight. Most people don't even see it anymore. They think it's just how life works. They believe the paperwork, the waiting, the approvals, the audits are just part of being a responsible adult. But what they're really doing is asking to live, asking to act, asking to be. And slowly, that permission culture becomes internalized. People begin to believe they need approval for everything, not just from government, but from peers, from platforms, from algorithms. You don't just ask for licenses, you ask for likes, for validation, for applause. And when it doesn't come, you stop moving, you hesitate, you shrink, because the culture has taught you not to act without a green light. This isn't just about law, it's about psychology, about power, about a society that has quietly shifted from encouraging sovereignty to enforcing submission. And because the process was slow, polite, and wrapped in the language of safety, most people didn't notice, or worse, they defended it. They believed in it. They began to police each other, to shame those who didn't ask for permission, to scorn those who acted freely. And that's how control wins, not through domination, but through normalization. The history of control is not a story of tyrants and revolutions. It's a story of slow erosion, of freedoms traded inch by inch in the name of order, until one day you wake up and realize you've built a world where nothing moves unless someone allows it. And you call that world modern, civilized. But is it truly free? Or just a more elegant prison?
Licensing life. Every right now requires approval. Look around your life, at everything you do, everything you use, everything you own. Then ask yourself a simple question. Did I need permission to have this, to do this, to live like this? The answer might unsettle you, because almost everything in modern life is licensed. Not suggested, not recommended, licensed, meaning you must request approval before you act. And if you act without it, you're punished. Not because you harmed anyone, but because you didn't ask. And this is the quiet transformation that has taken place. Rights that were once inherent have now become privileges granted by authorities. You can't start a business unless you register it, get a tax ID, pass inspections, pay fees, even if it's just you in a room with a laptop. You can't build a home on your land without government approval, even if you own the land outright. You can't drive a car without a license, and if your license is suspended, you lose the right to move freely. You can't fish, you can't hunt, you can't cut down a tree, you can't fly a drone, you can't film in public, you can't collect rainwater. You can't even hold a sign in the street without a permit in many cities. And each of these things used to be natural extensions of human life. Not anymore. Today, life is segmented into permission slips. You want to heal your body? You need a prescription. You want to teach others? You need a certification. You want to make money? You need a license. You want to sell lemonade? A permit. You want to repair your own home? A building code inspection. You want to move your money? KYC, AML, suspicion of fraud, algorithms that decide if your transaction goes through. If the system doesn't like what you're doing, your access is frozen, or flagged, or banned. Not because you broke a law, but because you stepped outside the expected protocol. And we've been trained to accept it, to believe that these systems exist for our safety, that without them, chaos would reign. But what's the cost of that safety? What happens when everything you do requires someone else's green light? You lose agency, you lose spontaneity, you lose the ability to live without surveillance and approval. The most tragic part? We're made to feel like it's normal, like it's responsible, like being licensed is a sign of adulthood, of good citizenship, of being part of society. But what it really means is that you have submitted. You have accepted that you are not the owner of your life. You are merely a user operating under terms of service. And those terms can change without notice, without consent, without recourse. This is not freedom. This is life on a lease. You are leasing your ability to act, and your lease can be revoked. They say freedom is the ability to act without permission. But in today's world, nearly every action of value requires permission. From education to entrepreneurship, from travel to speech, from parenting to building. And each new license is sold to you as protection. But protection from what? Often, the only thing you're being protected from is the idea that someone else might act without asking. That someone else might be free when you are not. And that scares people because they've built their lives inside the permission system. And to see someone ignore it is to be reminded that maybe it was never necessary in the first place. Maybe it was just control, dressed up as order. This goes beyond government. Corporations now require permission for basic existence. Want to keep your account? Follow the guidelines. Want to receive payments? Verify your identity. Want to share an idea? Pass the content filters. Want to earn income online? Avoid demonetization. One wrong move and the algorithm says no, and your ability to live disappears. Not because a person decided it, but because a system did. And there's no one to appeal to, no face to confront, no hearing to attend. Just silence, suspension, termination, access denied. This is the reality of a licensed life. A world where your worth is measured by your compliance, where your freedom is measured by your obedience, where your existence is measured by your permission level. You don't get to just live. You get to apply to live. And this system is expanding, faster, smarter, more automated. The rise of AI and big data means the permission net is getting tighter. More decisions made by code, more access tied to behavior, more freedom wrapped in digital chains. And most people don't see it because they've been raised in it, trained in it, schooled in it. They think it's just the way life is. But it wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to stay this way. The first step is awareness. The second is courage. Because when you realize that your life has been quietly licensed piece by piece, you're faced with a choice. Keep asking, keep obeying, keep pretending this is freedom, or stop. Reclaim what was always yours. Speak without permission. Build without approval. Live without waiting. But that choice has consequences, and not everyone is ready for them. Because once you see the cage, you can't unsee it. And once you stop asking, you'll see how many systems were never built to serve you, only to manage you. The truth is simple. If you need permission, it's not freedom. It's a contract, and contracts can be broken. What happens when you say no?
The algorithm is watching. Tech as the new gatekeeper. There was a time when permission came from people, a signature, a stamp, a spoken yes from someone in charge. But that world is fading, and what's replacing it is quieter, faster, and far more invisible. Today, you don't just need permission from a person, you need it from a system. And that system is no longer human, it's algorithmic. The new gatekeeper of your life is not a king or a bureaucrat, it's code, silent, automated, unseen, and it decides more than you think. Try posting a video. If the algorithm doesn't like the content, it's shadow banned. Try transferring money. If your spending pattern looks unusual, it's flagged. Try boarding a plane. If your profile triggers a risk score, you're delayed or denied. Try applying for a job. If your resume doesn't match the AI filter, it's rejected before a person even sees it. Try searching for the truth. If the algorithm prefers a narrative, you'll be fed only one version. Try saying something controversial. If the platform's guidelines disapprove, your account vanishes. This isn't fiction. This is now. A world where your access is silently managed by machines trained on data you didn't know you gave. Every like, every click, every search, every pause, every purchase, it all feeds the system. And the system uses that data to decide who gets to speak, who gets to move, who gets to build, who gets to be seen. It decides what's allowed, what's promoted, what's erased. And the scariest part? There is no appeal. You can't explain yourself to a bot. You can't reason with an algorithm. You can't protest to a server farm. There's no judge, no trial, just outputs, decisions, outcomes, calculated in milliseconds, based on parameters you don't control. And when the algorithm says no, your world gets smaller, quietly, efficiently, without warning. This is the new permission structure. It doesn't ask you to kneel. It simply turns off the light. It hides you, mutes you, slows your reach, cancels your income, freezes your funds. And because it happens silently, most people don't notice. They just think they failed, that their post didn't land, that their business didn't scale, that they weren't good enough. But in truth, they were filtered, silenced, not for breaking the law, but for breaking the pattern, for stepping outside the model, for saying something the machine couldn't categorize as safe. And that's the point. The algorithm doesn't understand truth, or justice, or nuance. It only understands compliance, predictability, control. And so it favors the repeatable, the agreeable, the compliant, the safe. It rewards the herd and punishes the outlier. And in that world, freedom becomes impossible. Because freedom is messy. It questions, it challenges, it explores, it breaks patterns, it pushes limits. And algorithms don't like that. They don't know what to do with that. So they suppress it. Not because they're evil, but because they're trained to minimize disruption. And freedom is disruption. It always has been. That's why real freedom can't survive in a system built to maintain order through code. Because code doesn't allow for rebellion, for deviation, for soul. It allows only what fits the model. And if you don't fit, you disappear, quietly,
automatically, without debate. This is the digital prison, built not from bars, but from behavioral data, enforced not by guards, but by recommendations, sustained not by violence, but by convenience, because the system makes it easy to stay inside, easy to conform, easy to comply. And the easier it gets, the less you notice what you've given up. Your voice, your reach, your ability to choose, your right to be seen without permission. This isn't just about social media, it's about everything. Your banking is digital, your education is digital, your communication, your commerce, your reputation, all of it managed by algorithms. And if the system ever decides you don't belong, you vanish. No door to knock on, no human to plead with, just silence. And that silence is growing. More platforms, more filters, more scoring, more automation, more trust and safety teams making rules you never voted on, enforcing values you never agreed to through code you'll never see. And it's all justified for your protection, for your security, for the greater good. But who defines that good? And who profits from that safety? The answer is not you. The algorithm is watching, scoring, sorting, approving, denying, and you don't even know the rules. You just feel them when you hit the invisible wall, when your post gets buried, when your funds are frozen, when your truth is marked as harm. And in that moment, you'll realize something profound. You're not free. You're being managed, not by leaders, not by laws, but by systems, by code, by a machine that doesn't care who you are, only how you behave. The algorithm is the new government, the new parent, the new judge. It decides what you get to see, what you get to say, who you get to be. And if you don't conform, it doesn't fight you, it just erases you. Quietly, efficiently, permanently. So ask yourself, who really grants you permission today? And what happens when the machine says no? Obedience rebranded as morality. If you want to control people completely, you don't just build walls. You don't just set rules. You redefine what's good, what's noble, what's moral. And then you attach obedience to it. Because the deepest kind of control isn't external, it's internal. It's not when people obey out of fear, it's when they obey out of virtue. When they believe that following the rules makes them righteous, that compliance is goodness, that silence is wisdom, that permission-seeking is maturity. This is the most powerful shift in modern society. Obedience didn't just become expected, it became praised, celebrated, framed as the responsible path, the correct path, the moral path. Think about how we raise children. Don't question, don't talk back, follow directions, ask before acting, wait for permission. Good kids obey, bad kids disobey. The lesson is clear. Morality equals obedience. And that programming sticks. It follows you into school, where the most rewarded students aren't always the smartest. They're the most compliant. The ones who memorize, who repeat, who raise their hands, who stay quiet when they're told to. Then it follows you into work. The good employee isn't the one with ideas. It's the one who follows process, meets deadlines, stays within boundaries, doesn't challenge the system. Then it follows you into society. The good citizen doesn't protest, doesn't dissent, doesn't ask hard questions. They follow the law even when the law is unjust. They pay taxes even when the taxes fund corruption. They stay in line even when the line leads nowhere. They wear the mask even when it hides the truth. And the more obedient they are, the more they are praised, held up as examples of morality, of honor, of responsibility. And those who resist, who question, who say no, they're branded as selfish, dangerous, irresponsible, immoral. Not because they harmed anyone, but because they've stepped outside the lines. And in a world where obedience has been rebranded as virtue, stepping outside the lines becomes the greatest sin. This is not accidental, it's engineered. A culture designed to police itself, to shame the rebel, to silence the outlier, not through punishment, but through moral judgment. You're not being jailed, you're being disapproved of, canceled, excluded, labeled. And that's enough to keep most people in line, because humans fear social rejection more than they fear almost anything. And the system knows this. It uses it. It weaponizes morality against you, not with violence, with virtue. But here's the problem. Obedience is not morality. They are not the same. Doing what you're told is not the same as doing what's right. History proves this again and again. The greatest evils in human history weren't carried out by monsters. They were carried out by obedient people, following orders, following rules, following systems, doing what they were told, trusting the process, believing they were good because they complied. From totalitarian regimes to genocides to experiments on humans, these weren't done by rebels. They were done by model citizens. And that should terrify you, because it means that obedience, when detached from conscience, becomes a weapon, a silent one, a respectable one, a socially approved one. And in modern society, we've blurred the lines so completely that most people no longer know where morality ends and obedience begins. We've been trained to measure goodness by how well we follow rules. But what if the rules are wrong? What if the system is broken? What if the permission you keep asking for is the very thing that's keeping you from being fully alive? You're told not to think like that it's dangerous, that it's ungrateful, that it's extreme. But the truth is simple. The most moral thing you can do is question. To ask who benefits from your obedience. To ask what values you're being told to obey. To ask why certain actions are only allowed when someone else says so. Because if your goodness is only valid when it fits inside their lines, it's not goodness, it's programming. And the system loves it, because obedient people don't make change. They maintain the status quo. They become the hands that hold the cage in place, not because they're evil, but because they think they're good. And that's what makes it so effective. You don't need guards if the prisoners believe they're protecting each other. You don't need a dictator if the people become their own enforcers. And that's where we are now. In a world where asking for permission is seen as noble, where waiting for approval is seen as mature, where silence is seen as strength, and where rebellion, even quiet rebellion, is seen as a threat. Not just to power, but to morality itself. The paradox permission is not just about control, it's about identity, about how you see yourself, and about what you've been taught to believe makes you a good person. But real morality is not compliance. It's courage. It's thinking for yourself. It's standing alone when the crowd is wrong. It's doing what's right even when no one gives you permission, especially then. Because if your freedom disappears the moment you disobey, it was never freedom. And if your goodness disappears the moment you question, it was never goodness. The system has redefined virtue, but you can redefine it back.
Protest does not equal permission. How resistance is neutralized. In every generation, there have been people who stood up, who said no, who challenged the system, who refused to wait for permission. And their names are remembered, not because they asked nicely, but because they disobeyed when obedience was expected. They marched, they spoke,
They broke unjust laws. They risked everything. And because of them, society changed. Rights were won. Tyranny was challenged. Voices were heard. But today, something has shifted. Protest still exists, but it has been tamed, regulated, controlled. Modern resistance is no longer a threat. It's a formality, a scheduled event, a public performance within a permission structure. You want to protest? You need a permit. You want to march? You need a route approved. You want to gather? You need to notify the authorities. You want to speak truth to power? You need to submit a request first. And if you don't follow the rules of protest, you're labeled a criminal. Not for what you say, but for how you say it, for when you say it, for where you say it. This is how resistance is neutralized, not by banning it, but by licensing it, by turning rebellion into paperwork, by making dissent feel like participation when it's really just submission with a louder voice. It's protest with a leash, controlled opposition, anger on a schedule. And the people protesting often don't even realize they've been boxed in because it feels like they're doing something. They're marching, they're chanting, they're posting, but nothing changes. Why? Because the system has learned how to absorb outrage, how to redirect it, how to turn it into data, into content, into metrics. Your resistance becomes a trend, a hashtag, a news cycle, and then it disappears, just like your freedom, just like your voice. It's not just about the streets anymore, it's about the screens. Try challenging the dominant narrative online. Your post might be fact-checked, your account might be limited, your reach might vanish. Not because you were wrong, but because you stepped outside the boundary of acceptable speech. Resistance now requires permission. You can question power as long as you stay within the lines. You can express frustration as long as you don't disrupt. You can criticize authority as long as you don't refuse to obey it. That's not protest. That's a pressure valve, a way to make people feel like they're free while ensuring nothing actually changes. And the system loves it, because contained dissent is better than real revolution. A protest with boundaries is better than a mind that won't submit. And so resistance is turned into ritual, a cycle, a loop. You get angry, you march, you post, you go home, you wait. Nothing changes. You get angry again. And the machine keeps running because you never stepped outside the rules. You never stopped asking for permission to be angry. But real protest doesn't ask. It doesn't wait. It doesn't submit a request. It acts. It disrupts. It refuses. Not out of violence, but out of principle. It says, "This is wrong, and I will not comply, even if it costs me, even if I lose, even if I'm punished." Because real resistance doesn't care about approval. It cares about truth. And that's what the system fears. Not the marches, not the slogans, but the quiet refusal to play along. The individual who says, "I don't need your permission to be free. I don't need your stamp to speak. I don't need your license to live." That kind of resistance can't be scheduled. It can't be regulated. It can't be contained, because it doesn't play by the rules designed to tame it. And that's what makes it powerful, but also rare. Because most people are taught to resist only in the ways they're allowed to question only what's approved, to protest only if it's safe. But safe protest is controlled protest, and controlled protest changes nothing. The paradox is clear. You're told you have the right to protest, but only if you do it within the system. And the moment your protest becomes effective, disruptive, dangerous to the structure, you're shut down. Not just physically, but digitally, socially, financially. You're deplatformed, debanked,
demonetized, you're erased, and the world keeps spinning. The system remains intact because resistance has been rebranded from rebellion to ritual, from power to performance. And most people can't tell the difference. They think they're fighting back, but they're just repeating a script, one written by the very institutions they're trying to resist. You don't need permission to protest. You never did. Because true protest isn't about permission. It's about principle. It's about saying no, loudly, quietly, publicly, privately. It's about living differently, thinking differently, choosing differently. And that can't be regulated. That can't be licensed. That can't be approved. It's dangerous. It's disruptive. It's real. And that's what the system fears. Because once enough people stop asking, the illusion breaks. The control fades. The gatekeepers lose their grip. And the world begins to shift, not through slogans, but through sovereign action. Protest is not something you wait for permission to do. It's something you are, in how you live, in what you refuse, in what you no longer accept. So the next time you want to resist, don't ask, act.
The psychological trap. Why we stop questioning. Control doesn't need chains if you can convince someone to stop asking questions. That's the psychological trap. A system of permission doesn't just control what you do, it controls how you think. It rewires your instincts. It teaches you to hesitate, to doubt your own voice, to look outward for approval before you move, before you speak, before you decide. And over time, that hesitation becomes permanent. You stop wondering why the rules exist. You stop imagining life without them. You stop asking if permission was ever necessary in the first place. This isn't just compliance, it's conditioning. A slow, invisible shift from action to passivity, from ownership to dependence, from sovereignty to submission. It doesn't happen overnight, it starts early. You're born curious, wild, free. But before you even understand the word freedom, you're taught to sit still, raise your hand, wait your turn, ask nicely, don't question, don't interrupt, don't challenge, over and over until it becomes second nature, until you no longer act unless someone tells you it's okay. And when you do act freely, you feel guilt, anxiety, fear. You've internalized the idea that permission is part of morality, that obedience is part of being a good person. So you silence yourself, you censor your own ideas, you shrink. And what's left is a version of you that's been edited by the expectations of others, by the fear of punishment, by the belief that someone else knows best. That's the trap. The moment you stop questioning, the system wins. Because questioning is the first act of freedom, the seed of rebellion, the beginning of all change. And the system can't survive that. So it kills your questions before they're born, with fear, with shame, with pressure, with rules that sound like wisdom, with language that confuses submission for intelligence. How many times have you thought of doing something, starting a business, creating art, saying no, walking away, but didn't? Not because it was wrong, but because you weren't sure it was allowed, because no one told you it was okay, because you felt like you needed someone else to open the door. That's the scar left by a permission-based world, the voice in your head that says, wait, check first, don't risk it. What will they think? What if it fails? What if they say no? And so you don't move, you don't try, you don't speak, and nothing changes. Because the system doesn't need you to stop you, it just needs you to stop yourself. It's the perfect trap, invisible, quiet, effective. You won't even know you're in it. You'll think it's just you, just your personality, just your anxiety, just your lack of clarity. But it's not. It was designed, engineered, reinforced through repetition, through education, through media, through culture. A society that rewards those who comply, that promotes those who stay in line, that punishes risk-takers not with prison, but with isolation, with ridicule, with silence. And you learn, not through violence, but through discomfort. You learn that questioning makes people uncomfortable, that speaking truth makes you the enemy, that standing out is dangerous. So you blend in, you adapt, you survive. But at what cost? At the cost of your voice, your vision, your power. Because the truth is, no system of control can hold you if you refuse to hold yourself back. But most people never reach that point. They've been trained too well to see rules as reality, to see the system as absolute, to see permission as the starting point for all action. So they live in a loop, dreaming, doubting, delaying, forever waiting for the sign that never comes, the voice that says, now it's okay. But that voice isn't real. No one is coming to grant you your life. No one is coming to give you permission to be who you are. You have to choose it. You have to question, even when it's scary, even when you're alone, especially then, because that's where freedom begins, not with rebellion, but with a question. A quiet refusal to accept the world as it is, a silent whisper that says, what if they're wrong? And once you ask that question, everything changes. The walls begin to show, the rules begin to crack, the fear begins to fade, because fear only thrives in silence, in ignorance, in unchallenged obedience. But when you question, truly question, you take back control. You reclaim your mind. You remember that you are not a subject, you are a sovereign, that you were born free, and the only thing standing between you and that freedom is belief, a belief that you need permission, but you don't, not to speak, not to create, not to change, not to leave, not to become. The trap is not made of laws, it's made of doubt, and the key is not revolution, it's awareness. Ask. Always ask. Because the moment you stop questioning, you stop being free. The corporate-state merger. Who really grants permission? You were taught that power lives in government, that the state makes the rules, that laws come from leaders and policies come from politics. But in today's world, that's no longer the full story. Because power has shifted, not away from control, but away from visibility. The question is no longer what laws govern me, but who actually grants me permission to live, speak, move, and exist. And when you follow that question to its roots, you find a quiet merger, a seamless fusion between governments and corporations. The two entities that once appeared separate are now one machine, one system, one force, one gatekeeper. And together, they've redefined how control works. It's no longer just about governments passing laws. It's about corporations enforcing values, platforms enforcing behavior, banks enforcing morality, algorithms enforcing silence. The state may write the rule book, but corporations write the code, and that code is now law. Not voted on, not debated, just deployed, quietly, instantly, globally. Want to earn income? You need a platform. Want to speak your mind? You need a channel. Want to move your money? You need a financial institution. Want to reach people? You need an algorithm. Want to be seen as real? You need verification. Every step of your modern life is mediated by a company. And those companies are not neutral. They are not democratic. They are not accountable to you. They can silence you, suspend you, shadow ban you, deny you access, without trial, without reason, without warning. And they often do it not because you broke a law, but because you broke the narrative, because your words, your actions, your ideas were inconvenient, uncomfortable, unaligned. This is what happens when the private sector becomes the true enforcer of social norms. Not through debate, but through deletion. Not through dialogue, but through denial. And the state allows it, encourages it, because it's useful. It gives plausible deniability. It creates layers of separation between oppression and responsibility. If your bank freezes your account, the government didn't do it. If your post is removed, the government didn't censor it. If your funds are locked, if your reach is gone, if your voice is silenced, it wasn't a law, it was a policy, a terms of service violation, an algorithmic flag, a community guideline. But the result is the same. You are silenced. You are denied. You are erased. And you can't vote it out. You can't appeal to a court. You can't demand justice, because it's not a government action, it's a corporate one. But make no mistake, it's power, real power, the kind that shapes your life, controls your access, governs your reality. And when corporations and governments align in their values, in their goals, in their enforcement methods, there is no longer any distinction. The merger is complete. The state legitimizes the system. The corporation operates it, and you, the citizen consumer, are caught in the middle, managed by both, protected by neither, controlled by all. You're told it's for your safety, that moderation is necessary, that filtering is essential, that if we didn't have these systems in place, chaos would reign. But what they never tell you is that the definition of safety keeps changing, that what's considered harmful keeps expanding, that what gets silenced today might be something you desperately need to say tomorrow. And by the time you realize the cage has closed, it's too late, because this system doesn't come with warning signs. It comes with convenience, with apps, with sleek design, with personalization. It's easy, frictionless, seamless, until the day it isn't. Until the day the algorithm says no, the payment fails, the post disappears, the door closes, and you realize you don't know who made the decision or how to fight it, because the system was never meant to be questioned, only used. And the more you use it, the more it learns you, scores you, sorts you, grants you access, or denies it. Not based on your rights, but on your profile, your behavior, your alignment, your compliance. This is the new reality, where the line between government and corporation is blurred, where elected officials defer to tech giants, where public policy is shaped by private interest, where your freedom depends on a company's mood, your identity depends on a server, your agency depends on a dashboard, and all of it is fragile, conditional, revocable. So ask yourself, who really grants permission in your life? Is it your government, your constitution, or is it a faceless algorithm, a customer support agent, a community standards team? Is it a terms of service agreement you didn't read, a checkbox you clicked without understanding, a reputation score you can't see? The truth is, your life today runs on approvals you didn't vote for, policies you didn't write, and systems you didn't choose. And until you reclaim control over your choices, your voice, your resources, you are not free. You are dependent on machines, on platforms, on partnerships between power and profit. The corporate-state merger isn't coming. It's already here. And if you want to resist it, you can't just shout at politicians. You must also say no to the systems that claim to serve you while quietly managing you. You must reclaim the parts of your life that don't require permission and rebuild what has been quietly taken. because no one is coming to separate power from profit for you. That choice, if it still exists, belongs to you.
When rights become credits, social score systems. You were told you had rights, that they were permanent, guaranteed, unshakable. But what happens when rights become points? When freedom becomes something you earn? When access to life depends not on who you are, but how you behave? That's not the future. That's the now. Quiet, creeping, spreading. It's called the social score. And you might think it only exists in one country, in one political system. But look again, because it's here, everywhere. It just wears different clothes, different names. In some places, it's explicit, a visible number, a real-time score. Your behavior tracked and evaluated. Your shopping habits, your speech, your friends, your debt, your location, your loyalty, all combined into a digital report card that decides where you can go, what you can do, and who you're allowed to be. In other places, it's hidden. You won't see a score, but it's there. In your credit rating, in your online reputation, in your algorithmic trust ranking, in your payment approval speed, in your job application outcome, in your airport experience. The system is scoring you, constantly, silently, and most terrifying of all, you don't even know what the rules are. You don't know what increases your score, what lowers it, what data is included, who decides what matters. You just feel the results. A blocked transaction, a denied application, a shadowed post, a suspension notice, a sudden silence, and you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? That's the trap, because the answer is you weren't obedient enough, you weren't safe enough, you weren't predictable enough, you didn't fit the profile, and so the system adjusted. You lost access, not as punishment, but as policy, and no one had to tell you. No one had to confront you. The system simply decided, based on your score. And the more you conform, the more access you get. It rewards obedience. It rewards silence. It rewards safe, approved behavior. But at what cost? At the cost of authenticity, of courage, of individuality. Because when rights become credits, you stop living freely. You start performing. You live for the algorithm. You think in terms of optics. You measure every action by its potential impact on your score. Will this post cost me visibility? Will this opinion cost me clients? Will this friendship cost me access? And slowly, you lose yourself. You stop asking what's true and start asking what's safe. What's allowed, what's rewarded. You become your own censor, your own gatekeeper, not because you want to, but because you're afraid. Afraid of losing points, afraid of being flagged, afraid of being shut out. That's the genius of the system. It doesn't need to control you directly. It just needs to create a score you care about. And once you care, you will do the rest. You will fall in line. You will correct yourself. You will pressure others to behave. You will shame the rebels. You will protect the system because you believe it protects you. But it doesn't. It protects itself. It protects power. It protects control. And you are just a user, a metric, a moving dot in a giant behavioral graph, a citizen reduced to data, and that data becomes your fate. This isn't conspiracy, it's policy, it's infrastructure, it's already happening. Look at how payment processors cut off people for violating values. Look at how platforms demonetize creators for community violations. Look at how ride services ban users based on vague safety concerns. Look at how insurance companies adjust premiums based on location, habits, posts. This is social scoring, not in the future, right now. And it's spreading, because once you can attach access to behavior, you can manage society quietly, smoothly, efficiently. No need for force, just ratings. No need for police, just profiles. No need for trials, just terms of service. And if you don't comply, you disappear, not physically, but digitally, economically, socially. You become invisible, untrustworthy, unscored. And in a world where access is everything, that is exile. That is modern erasure. So what do? We stop playing the game. We stop chasing points. We stop trading truth for comfort. We stop adjusting ourselves to fit systems that were never built to honor us. We reclaim our rights not as rewards, but as realities, as birthrights, as non-negotiable. Because once you accept scoring, you've already accepted subjugation. Once you accept conditions, you've already surrendered your autonomy. Once you accept that freedom must be earned, you've already lost it. And if you don't say no now, the system will never stop saying yes to itself. Rights are not credits. Freedom is not a score. Your value is not an algorithm. Live accordingly.
The fragility of conditional freedom. Freedom is only real if it survives disagreement, if it survives dissent, if it survives disobedience. Because anything that disappears the moment you say no was never yours to begin with. That's the brutal truth most people never see. Because most people have only experienced conditional freedom. Freedom with strings attached. Freedom with terms and conditions. Freedom that looks like choice, but only when you're compliant. And as long as you stay inside the lines, you believe you're free. As long as you obey the rules, you feel empowered. As long as you never test the limits, you think there are none. But the moment you push back, the truth reveals itself. Try speaking an unpopular opinion. Try refusing a mandate. Try skipping a protocol. Try challenging the official story. And watch how quickly your freedom evaporates. Your voice is flagged. Your account is banned. Your access is revoked. Your reputation is destroyed. Your money is frozen. Not because you broke a law, but because you broke a pattern. You disrupted the illusion. You revealed the terms of the contract. And in that moment, you'll realize something chilling. Your freedom was never real. It was a temporary pass, a behavioral reward, a conditional privilege. And now that you've stepped outside the boundaries, the system withdraws it, punishes you, labels you, silences you. And the most terrifying part? Everyone else applauds, because they've accepted the same deal. And if your freedom was fake, maybe theirs is too. And they don't want to believe that. So instead of questioning the system, they defend it. They shame you. They say you deserved it, that you crossed the line, that you shouldn't have known better, that you were a threat. Because admitting that freedom disappears when challenged would mean admitting they were never free, that they were only ever allowed. And that's too painful to face. So they choose comfort, compliance, denial, and they call it freedom. But freedom is not comfortable. It's not tidy. It's not universally liked. It's messy. It's dangerous. It's disruptive. It offends. It challenges. It resists. It says no when everyone else says yes. It stands up when everyone else sits down. And it does not vanish when things get hard. That's how you know it's real. Conditional freedom is fragile. It cannot tolerate pressure. It cannot survive defiance. It cannot endure truth. It only works when everyone agrees, when everyone submits, when everyone plays along. But that's not freedom. That's programming. That's control. That's compliance dressed up as choice, and it shatters the moment you stop playing. The system is designed to look stable, but it's not. It's brittle. It needs constant agreement, constant behavior tracking, constant enforcement. Because without those things, it collapses. It cannot survive truly free people. Because free people don't ask, don't beg, don't wait. They act, they speak, they build, they move without permission. And the system fears that, so it creates fear in return. Fear of losing your job, fear of being censored, fear of being called dangerous, fear of being labeled, fear of being alone. But here's the irony. If your freedom depends on silence, it's already gone. If your freedom depends on fitting in, it's already lost. If your freedom disappears when tested, it was never freedom. It was decoration, a costume, a distraction. Real freedom costs something. It requires risk. It requires courage. It requires saying no, even when it's unpopular, especially then. It requires holding your ground, even when the system tells you to sit down. And yes, it might cost you access. It might cost you approval. It might cost you comfort. But what you gain is something the system can never offer: self-ownership, sovereignty, dignity, integrity. A life that is yours, truly yours. Not rented, not borrowed, not leased in exchange for behavior, but lived, fully, honestly, dangerously free. That kind of freedom cannot be revoked, because it doesn't come from them, it comes from within. And once you taste it, you'll never mistake permission for liberty again. So test it, push it, say no. Not to be rebellious, but to be real, to see what remains, to see who you are without the leash, because that's the only way you'll ever know if you were actually free, or just allowed to believe you were.
The price of silence, how we enable the system. Every system of control needs two things to survive: enforcement and silence. Enforcement creates the rules, silence protects them. Enforcement punishes the disobedient, silence isolates them. And over time, silence becomes the more powerful weapon, because once people stop speaking, stop questioning, stop resisting, the system no longer needs to fight. It simply operates. It becomes the default, the invisible, the unquestioned, and you become its defender, not because you believe in it, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. This is how tyranny survives in modern times, not through dictatorship, through participation, through quiet agreement, through a society that polices itself, not with guns, but with guilt, with shame, with fear, with be careful, with don't say that, with just let it go. And so we let it go again and again. We stay quiet when a post is censored. We say nothing when a voice disappears. We look away when a friend is deplatformed. We rationalize when someone loses their job over an opinion. We justify the freezing of accounts, the canceling of creators, the silencing of dissent. We tell ourselves it's complicated, that it's necessary, that they probably deserved it. Because if they didn't, then maybe we're next. And that's too terrifying to face. So we pretend, we go on, we keep our heads down, we keep our voices low, we become cautious, calculated, politically correct, socially safe, algorithmically invisible, and we call it wisdom. But it's not wisdom, it's fear. And fear, when left unchallenged, becomes complicity. Because silence is not neutral, it's a choice. And every time you choose not to speak, not to question, not to act, you're making a choice that supports the system, a system that punishes courage and rewards submission, a system that only works because people allow it to, because people believe that saying nothing will protect them. But it doesn't. It only delays the moment the silence comes for them, too. First they silence the loud, then the brave, then the different, then the small, and eventually they silence you. And by then there's no one left to speak, no one left to hear, no one left to care. That's the price of silence, a slow death of truth, a slow erosion of freedom, a slow surrender of the soul. And it always begins with good people, smart people, quiet people, who tell themselves that silence is safety, that it's better to be invisible than to be targeted, that it's better to go along than to be alone. But freedom doesn't live in silence. It lives in the sound of a voice that speaks anyway, that speaks when it's hard, that speaks when it's dangerous, that speaks when everyone else has stopped. Because that voice is the one thing the system cannot control, and it knows it. That's why it tries so hard to silence it, not just with punishment, but with pressure, with peer shame, with social judgment, with emotional exhaustion, until even the strong go quiet. But here's what you must remember. Your silence is not just your own. It belongs to everyone who hears it, or doesn't. Because when you stay silent, others take your cue. They think, if they're not speaking, maybe I shouldn't either. And slowly, the light goes out. Not all at once, but one voice at a time. That's how freedom dies. Not with a bang, with a whisper that says nothing, a whisper that once carried fire, but now carries fear. And the system wins again, not because it was stronger, but because you said nothing. So speak, not recklessly, but truthfully, not arrogantly, but bravely. Speak because silence has a cost far greater than rejection, far greater than discomfort, far greater than risk. The cost of silence is a world that forgets how to be free, a world that forgets how to think, a world that forgets how to feel, a world that forgets how to live. And you are the one who reminds it, with your words, with your questions, with your refusal to pretend, even when it's easier, even when it's lonely, even when you're afraid, especially then. Because freedom doesn't need permission, but it does need a voice. And the moment you stop using it, the system doesn't have to take your freedom. You've already given it away.
Reclaiming sovereignty, what real freedom demands. You don't ask for freedom. You act like you already have it. That's where sovereignty begins. Not with paperwork, not with permission, not with waiting for someone to approve your independence, but with the decision to live as if you are already free. Because if you have to ask for it, it's not freedom. And if you have to wait for it, it's not yours. Reclaiming sovereignty doesn't mean rage. It doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean tearing down the world. It means owning your life, owning your mind, owning your voice, without apology, without compromise, without delay. It means no longer living like a guest in your own story, no longer behaving like someone else is in charge of your destiny, no longer shrinking your choices to fit the comfort of a system designed to keep you small. Because here's the truth, no system can give you what you refuse to claim. No government can make you sovereign. No platform can make you whole. No algorithm can give you courage. These things must be taken, not by force, but by choice. Quietly, clearly, consistently, one decision at a time. You reclaim your sovereignty when you stop asking for validation, when you stop waiting for the green light, when you stop playing by rules you never agreed to, when you start acting from truth, not fear, from purpose, not protocol, from values, not popularity. And that path is not easy. It costs you comfort. It costs you approval. It costs you belonging. Because the moment you reclaim your sovereignty, the world no longer knows what to do with you. You're not predictable, not programmable. not manageable. You say no when everyone else says yes. You build when others wait. You move when others hesitate. You speak when others stay silent. And that makes you dangerous, not to people, but to systems. Systems that depend on your silence, on your permission, on your compliance. But once you see the illusion, once you taste your power, once you feel what it's like to move without asking, it's over. You can't go back. You can't unsee. You can't forget. You only move forward, and every step forward is a rebellion against the life you were told to accept. A life of waiting, of asking, of hoping for someone else to let you be. That life is gone, because you've remembered something the world worked very hard to make you forget. You were born free. You don't need permission to speak truth, to walk away, to start over, to create, to love, to resist, to become. You only need the courage to do it, to live it, to embody it, even when the cost is high, even when the crowd disapproves, even when the system retaliates. Because true freedom is not what they can take from you, it's what they can't make you give up. And sovereignty is not something you earn, it's something you awaken. The moment you stop outsourcing your power, the moment you stop waiting for rescue, the moment you say, "This is my life and I don't need permission to live it," that's the moment everything changes. You begin to think differently, speak differently, move differently. You begin to act not from reaction, but from clarity, from knowing who you are and who you're not. You're not a number, not a profile, not a consumer, not a demographic, not a user in their system. You are a soul, a creator, a force, a human being, unrepeatable, unownable, untamed. And your life is not a license, it's a birthright, one they tried to turn into a product, a policy, a protocol. But you remembered. And once you remember, you reclaim. You reclaim your time, your choices, your presence, your voice, your future. You stop waiting for someone to allow you. You stop pretending there's a gate. You walk forward without apology. And the world begins to adjust. Slowly, painfully, reluctantly, but it adjusts. Because real freedom doesn't wait. It leads. And if enough people lead, the system falls behind. Not through revolution, through evolution. Through individuals who stop playing small, stop playing safe, stop playing by someone else's rules, and start playing real. Start playing free. Start playing sovereign. That's what real freedom demands. Not permission, but presence. Not compliance, but courage. Not followers, but founders. So be one, not tomorrow, now. Not when they say it's okay, but when you decide it's time. Because it is. Micro-revolutions, defying the permission culture. Not every revolution begins with fire. Some begin with a whisper, a choice, a quiet no, a simple refusal to wait for permission. And when you make that choice, when you act without asking, you start a micro-revolution. Not on the news, not on a stage, but in your own life, in your own home, in your own mind. That's where real change begins. Because systems of control don't collapse when you fight them. They collapse when you stop needing them. When you build a life that doesn't rely on approval, when you stop outsourcing your voice, your value, your decisions. And that shift, that small rebellion, is more powerful than any protest. You don't need to overthrow the world. You need to stop letting it run you. Stop waiting. Stop asking. Start creating. That's how you break the spell. Micro-revolutions are not about noise. They're about sovereignty in action. You start your own business without waiting for the right time or the perfect conditions. You build something of value without chasing credentials or external praise. You learn what you want to learn, not what the system says you're allowed to. You speak what you believe, not what the algorithm rewards. You walk away from systems that no longer honor you. You stop explaining your truth to people who have no intention of understanding it. These are not small acts. They are subversive, dangerous, transformative, because they say one thing over and over. I no longer need your permission to be who I am. And when enough people say that, consistently, quietly, unapologetically, the culture shifts. The control weakens. The gatekeepers lose relevance because they're no longer guarding anything you want. That's how you win. Not by tearing the system down, but by making it obsolete. By building outside it, around it, beyond it. And that begins with small acts of defiance. You choose real conversations over curated posts. You grow your own food instead of relying on processed systems. You educate your children to think, not just to pass. You create art that breaks formulas. You share ideas without editing your soul. You stop performing. You start living. You make eye contact with life again. You return to yourself. And in doing so, you light a match. A tiny flame that says, I remember who I am. And others see it and remember too. Because we've all been waiting for someone else to go first, to give us permission to be free. But no one is coming. There is no permission slip for sovereignty. Only action, only decision, only you. The beauty of micro-revolutions is that they can't be banned, they can't be censored, they can't be shut down, because they happen from within, in the space between silence and expression, between compliance and courage, between routine and reawakening. The moment you choose to live without asking, you're already free. Even if the system doesn't recognize it, even if the world resists it, even if the old voices try to pull you back into the pattern, you've already stepped out. And that step echoes. You won't need to shout, you won't need to fight, you'll just live. And that will be enough. Enough to disrupt, enough to inspire, enough to create space for others to do the same. And the system will feel it. 1,000 quiet no's. 1,000 lives reclaimed. 1,000 souls saying, this is mine now. That's what breaks the cycle. Not rage, but reclamation. Not violence, but vision. Not war, but walking away and building something better, something real, something human. So start small. Start now. Speak the truth in one conversation. Say no to one compromise. Say yes to one dream you've put on hold. Turn one page, make one move, take one risk, then another, and another, until your life no longer resembles the one you were told to live. Until you look around and realize you don't live on permission anymore. You live on purpose. That's the revolution. That's the fire. And it begins with you.
The final question: what will you choose? This entire time you thought freedom was something granted to you, something protected by law, supported by government, confirmed by culture. You thought it was stable, permanent, yours by default. But now you know better. Now you see what was always hidden in plain sight. That freedom, real freedom, is not a condition you live under. It's a choice you live out. It's not something they give. It's something you claim. And if you don't claim it, someone else will define it for you. Dress it up, sell it back, wrap it in policies and passwords and protocols until it doesn't even look like freedom anymore. Just access, just permission,
just temporary access to a life that was supposed to be yours. But now you know. And that knowledge comes with responsibility. Because once you see the illusion, you can't pretend it's real. You can't unknow the cost of your silence. You can't unfeel the weight of the leash. You can't go back to calling the cage a home. So here you are, standing at the edge of the story they wrote for you. The story that said, be good, be quiet, stay small, wait your turn, follow the rules, and maybe you'll get to live a decent life. But what if you don't want decent? What if you want real? What if you want to feel your pulse again? What if you want to wake up in a life that belongs to you, not just one you're allowed to rent through compliance? What if you're done performing, done pretending, done waiting? What if today is the day you stop asking and start choosing? Because the system won't change first. It never does. It adapts to your choices, your standards, your courage, or your fear. The system is built on your consent, silent or spoken, and every day you remain quiet, careful, controlled, you are voting for the world to stay this way. But every time you speak without permission, every time you live without waiting, every time you choose truth over safety, you vote for something else, a new reality, a new world, one that begins with you, one that doesn't require approval, one that doesn't score your humanity or filter your voice or ask you to trade authenticity for access. That world is possible, but only if you build it. And that building begins now, not with strategy, not with grand declarations, but with a simple, powerful choice. So here is the final question. What will you choose? Will you keep asking, or will you start acting? Will you keep seeking permission to be yourself, or will you reclaim the life that has always been yours? Will you wait for freedom, or will you live it now, even if no one gives you the green light? Even if it's hard, even if it's messy, even if you lose things along the way. Because what you gain, the dignity, the clarity, the sovereignty, that can never be taken from you again. So what will it be? Silence or speech? Obedience or ownership? Fear or freedom? The system is waiting, watching, hoping you'll stay in line, hoping you'll keep believing the lie, that freedom must be earned, that approval is safety, that silence is peace. But it's not. And deep down, you already know that. So this is the moment, the line, the invitation. You don't need permission. You never did. You just needed to remember. Now you have. The rest is up to you.